I do have to say that I'm proud beyond words to be here today to introduce Angela Davis. She's one of the most brilliant, effective, and beautiful people to emerge with a leading anti-racist voice that speaks for a democratic, free, and just society in which all persons can live in harmony and with equal opportunities. She brings to the movement her principled resistance, her deep scholarship, and her talent as a teacher, author, and tireless organizer against the prison industrial complex. Her example and life experience provides inspiration for us all to keep on keeping on in the struggle for social justice. And today is not the first time Angela Davis has been hosted in Santa Clara County. She was hosted here in 1971 by the prison industrial complex, behind bars, falsely charged with murder, kidnapping, and criminal conspiracy. Her trial started in Marin County, where several people were killed in an attempted prisoner escape. Angela's lawyers sought a change of venue. Despite objections, the court moved her trial here to San Jose. Along with the trial came the United Committee to Free Angela Davis. But that name didn't quite fit. Angela was and is no self-concerned individualist. The name became the National Committee to Free Angela Davis and all political prisoners. It inspired and organized a worldwide movement to free Angela. Some of Angela's legal team met with the Community Alert Patrol, CAP, of which I've just spoken. CAP took its cues, as I mentioned, from the police radio and went into the community with cameras and tape recorders to protect the people. Angela's lawyers gave the Community Alert Patrol a list of hundreds of potential jurors. They asked us to search out everything possible about each potential juror before they would be questioned in the court's jury selection process. The challenge was to find a fair-minded jury here in a city that had been brainwashed with media imagery of Angela as a dangerous communist terrorist. Overnight, CAP became the Angela Davis Jury Investigation Team. CAP volunteers strictly avoided illegal contact with any jurors, but were able to feed the lawyers solid daily information that helped them to choose a jury that exonerated Angela Davis and afterward celebrated her innocence. That jury handed Angela the last 43 years up till today, in which she has put her shoulder to the wheel of freedom, struggling against the perversity of the prison industrial complex and working toward a democratic, free, and just society in which we all can live in harmony and peace with equal opportunities. Angela Davis.
Good afternoon. Well, first of all, it's really wonderful to be here. When Fred was introducing me and pointed out it wasn't the first time I was in this area, I thought he was going to refer to the last time I spoke here at Anza College. But then, of course, he reminded me that my very first visit to this part of California was in a police car. And I lived for quite some time in a small holding cell in Palo Alto, and the trial eventually took place in San Jose. First, let me say that it's really wonderful to be here, and I want to thank everyone involved in organizing this event, Edmundo Norte, and of course, Sharat Lynn, Michelle Cordova, and all of the representatives of the San Jose Peace and Justice Center. And it's so wonderful to see Fred Hirsch again, whom I've known, as he pointed out, for over 40 years, and whose work, along with that of the Community Alert Patrol, helped the legal defense team to pick a jury that was willing to listen to the defense we presented, and therefore was responsible, along with the participation of millions of people all over the world who were demanding freedom for Angela Davis and all political prisoners. So I want to talk for a short time, and because this has been billed as a conversation, I definitely want to allow time for a dialogue with you. It's wonderful to see so many of you here. I think your presence is an indication of the fact that we have reached a very particular kind of historical conjuncture. And I want to begin by saying that we're all very fortunate to be alive at this moment. Because this is a moment that tells us that change is possible, that radical change is possible. Virtually every day we read about some act of police violence, police racism, right? And there are those who say, I wonder why the police are killing, so many black and brown people these days. And what, of course, they don't recognize is that this violence has a very long history. It goes all the way back to the era of slavery, all the way back to the era of the genocidal colonization of this land and the destruction of the lives of indigenous people. What has made it possible for racist police violence to become a public issue is precisely the activism of young people and a few older ones, but mostly young people all over the country. Last summer, when Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson, Missouri, did we imagine that within such a relatively short period of time, new movements would emerge, protests would happen, daily demonstrations would occur, solidarity would be coming forth from countries all over the world, including from occupied Palestine. So I want us to begin by recognizing that racism never occurs in isolation from global economic and political developments. We speak out, of course, against the racism we experience inside this country, against Black people, against Latinos, against Native Americans, Asian Americans, Arab and Muslim Americans. But it is important to recognize that, that this racism has global dimensions as well. And perhaps most important for us to understand as we attempt to build movements and build resistance against racist violence today is perhaps what is most important is to understand the extent to which anti-Arab and anti-Muslim racism have been, you might say, articulated with anti-Black and anti-Latino racism to produce even more dangerous modes of violence and inequality under the sign of the war on terror. And I mention this because oftentimes we assume that we're talking about two different things. But we learned very quickly last summer when we saw the police in Ferguson perform in their military garb, with their military weapons, with their military armored cars, and using tear gas that Palestinian activists noticed through the images that were disseminated through social media were made by the exact same company as provided the Israeli army with tear gas that was used against Palestinian activists. So I think in the very first place, we have to acknowledge the global context of what is happening here. And I had the opportunity, was it 2 or 3 weeks ago, to spend some time with a woman by the name of Razmia Odeh. And I'm wondering if anybody is familiar with her name, Razmia Odeh. Okay, San Jose Peace and Justice Center knows Razmia Odeh, who lives in Chicago and has been a community activist for many years. She was recently arrested and imprisoned and eventually charged with filling out fraudulent information on a naturalization application. Razmia Odeh is a Palestinian American woman who spent time in an Israeli prison and was tortured, was sexually tortured in front of her father. So much so that it has been extremely difficult for her to even describe what happened to her many years ago. The reason she has been charged with filling out fraudulent information on a naturalization application is because she did not say she had been convicted. You know, they ask you, have you ever been convicted of a crime? Right? I mean, how many applications do you fill out when they ask that question? When you want to get a job, as a matter of fact, generally when you apply for admission to an educational institution, as a matter of fact, you should know parenthetically that there are campaigns all over the country designed to ban the bots. Ban the bots. So because, of course, the collateral consequences of having been exposed to the prison industrial complex mean that it will be difficult for you ever to find a job for the rest of your life. In some states, it will be impossible for you to participate in the political process of electing someone to office. But I was talking about Razmia O'Day, who now is going to be deported to Jordan if we do not create the kind of movement that will save her life. And she's such an amazing person. I had the opportunity to spend time with her at a conference that took place recently in Chicago. And I'd like to urge all of you to go to the Razmia O'Day website. You will be able to find further information about her case and about what you can do to save her life. Prison abolitionists. And when we talk about institutionalized racism today, when we talk about institutionalized racist violence, we have to talk about the prison system. We have to acknowledge that there are over 1.5 million people in the various facilities that are associated with the prison industrial complex. Not only state and federal prisons, but city and county jails, and not only jails and prisons, but also immigrant detention facilities. Immigrant detention facilities represent, for private prison companies, the most profitable sector of private prison businesses. As a matter of fact, the private prison companies are responsible for some of the most repressive legislation against immigrants. And we all know what has been going on in places like Arizona and Alabama and Georgia. You can thank the private prison companies for trying to create conditions for the entrance of more bodies into immigrant detention facilities. But we also have to talk about jails in Indian country, which constitute a separate category. And when we think about the ways in which the violence of the genocidal colonization that laid the basis for what we all often speak about as the U.S. democracy. Isn't that kind of like a contradiction in terms? But I think that that we should always acknowledge that whatever we do, wherever we're gathering on the land of indigenous people. Let us never forget that. And then there are the military prisons. Perhaps you know about the case of Chelsea Manning and many others who are in prisons and in the military. As a matter of fact, instead of calling this a democratic country, we should call it a prison nation. Because there are more prisons in this country than anywhere else in the world. There are more people in prison than anywhere else in the world. There are proportionately more people behind bars. So if there's anything that is distinctive about the United States of America, it is that it is a prison nation.